Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Now, Gran Turismo 7 update 1.25 arrived today, and as per usual on update day, I have managed to cover everything within this update, and I'm here now to give you my overall opinion on update 1.25. So update 1.25 sits in a kind of strange place for me. It comes off the back of, in my honest opinion, two of the most disappointing and worst updates we ever got within Gran Turismo 7. That being update 1.20 with the ridiculously overhyped Barcelona layouts, where only one actually felt new and fresh, which was the rallycross track, which in my honest opinion I kind of count as its own individual track. But then again, the kind of dirt racing in this game isn't kind of really that good or that popular. Whilst it is better than it was at launch, it's sadly a track that's kind of just faded away after a couple of weeks. But in my opinion, it is still my go-to kind of rallycross track when I'm messing around with subscribers and stuff. Then obviously we had 1.23, which was probably the most hated update in terms of people being, verbal about it. In terms of the, the two EV cars, the events and everything, I feel like, that was the one where most people were like, okay, this is just absolutely ridiculous at this point. And I have to agree, 120 and 1.23 were absolutely dreadful in terms of content. Now, obviously, 1.25, the trailer dropped yesterday, and I was quite verbal about how this is a bad move for the game, especially kind of breaking that cycle when we should have had what is essentially a brand new track. And obviously we didn't get one. Now, in terms of that next track, it's pretty much confirmed that it is Grand Valley. So, be prepared for that. Now, a lot of people are saying they're probably holding off for the sort of World Series finale or whatever it is. I tend to agree with that. I can see that obviously now it's definitely not come with this update. That is more than likely when it's going to drop, and they're probably going to try and, build up a ton of hype for the World Series by, kind of unveiling Grand Valley returning, obviously a massive fan favourite over the years. And I genuinely think it will be a very good addition. Do I think it could be a little bit late at that point? Maybe. In terms of my opinion, I will always stick with Gran Turismo, as well as cover every other racing game. That's just kind of my thing. But Gran Turismo is always going to be a very special place in my heart. So yes, you can essentially tug on those nostalgia strings when it comes to me. And if they do announce Grand Valley in a big spectacle and make a big deal about it, I'm all good for it. So yes, a little bit off topic, but it's kind of just a hint at what is probably coming up pretty soon, and obviously my opinion on those previous updates, which kind of puts into context what I think about 1.25. Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room at this point. Was update 1.25 absolutely game-changing? Did it bring a ton of content? Was it an absolutely massive update? Did it kind of bring these features which still have not come? Well, no, obviously, because I've just told you they haven't come. So things like, selling cars, is that here? No. Am I really that bothered? No. I mean, honestly, I've never understood the hype behind selling cars. Now, for me, I'm going to kind of talk on this subject because, yes, this is going to be a bit of a longer video because I feel like there's a lot I need to get off my chest. In terms of selling cars, am I overly bothered for it? Honestly, no. Is it going to be a pretty useless feature? Yes. Now, if you kind of have heard how this is going to work, I did make a video on this, but obviously not everyone's going to have watched that. People are essentially still assuming that selling cars is going to work, where you essentially go in, you have that car, and you just get rid of it there and then. And you'll get like, what? People are kind of thinking they'll get like 50%. No, you're not. You're going to get around about a fifth of the value of the car, 10% for, of the value of each individual upgrade. So if an upgrade, say like 10 grand, you'll get a grand on that part. There will be a set limit to kind of how it works, so it'll be a bit like a used dealer. It's just not going to be the typical system. It's very much going to be kind of based around the economy of Gran Turismo 7, which we all know, yes, it's terrible. That's kind of old news at this point. And to be honest, in my opinion, I don't think it's overly terrible. I think what makes it seem worse is the fact there's not many grinding events, and that's another thing I will touch on, but I will touch on it a little bit later. So yes, there are still missing features within this update. No, they haven't come this time around. Do I think they're kind of waiting for around festive season, or possibly like a lot of people seem to expect around when Forza comes out? More than likely, they're going to want to kind of divert people away at that point. I think they would be pretty silly not to. But that's just kind of how business works. It's all about kind of taking away from your competitor. But do I think it's at a point where for a lot of people it might just be a little bit too late? Yes. So yes, there is still very many features missing, which a lot of people have been absolutely crying for months. That's just, that's done. Okay, we've discussed that. We get it. There's a ton missing from Gran Turismo 7, and that's kind of obvious. I've made my own personal comments on that. Do I want to be overly critical in this video? No, and there's a reason for that, because I genuinely enjoyed all the content there. Nothing really felt out of place at all. Nothing felt like it was just shoehorned in for the sake of it. Every single event we got had its own vibe. The cafe menu had its own vibe. The cars themselves are absolutely amazing, and in my opinion cater to everyone. Obviously you're going to get them people out there that just complain for the sake of complaining, that or the GTR is just an updated version of a car that we essentially have. It's a reskin. Not really. In terms of, racing potential, that more modern GTR is a lot better than the previous iteration. Yes, it may not look that much difference, but in terms of, the way it is as a car, as a kind of update to a model that Nissan released, yes, it's a very good car, and in my opinion it put the game in the right direction. It started to begin to update that GT3 roster, which it massively needs updating. Obviously we've had some classic GT3s enter, but obviously we've not had a modern one. Now obviously, yes, it's a 2018 model, and I believe the GT3 version hasn't been massively overhauled since then, so it makes sense that it is that version. However, it does then replace a version of a car which is almost a decade old at this point, and while they not made it look overly different, essentially it's kind of an evolution of that original GTR, and I'm honestly all for it. Like I said, it makes the GT3 category just that little bit more modernized. Obviously we've got the Mazda Roadster. A lot of people are saying, oh, we've got loads of Roadsters in this game. Personally, I'm happy with it. It feels like a proper cup sporty version that you could do some awesome one makes with. So again, I personally don't have a problem with that. In terms of sort of repetitive cars in the Gran Turismo franchise, it is kind of known for it. It's sort of a meme that Gran Turismo has always kind of embraced, that there's 100 different versions of one car, and it's genuinely not as honestly bad nowadays compared to what it used to be, but that's just kind of the way Gran Turismo works. So yes, I can understand the criticism, and yes, they clearly have a ton of content already ready to go. Are they holding it back? Yes, clearly, obviously, because that's the business model, like I spoke about. But let's actually, get past all the negative bits, and I will give you my outright opinion on each of the cars, if they're worthy, all the events and stuff. Let's get into the main meat of the videos. Let's actually be positive, because I've actually come away from this update actually feeling quite positive about it. There was nothing that I particularly hated. There was nothing that, when I kind of look at it from the content that we are given, that content was, well, great, to be honest. So let's talk about car number one. The car that you are seeing right now, the Maserati Marek. Is it a worthy addition to the game? 100%. It's a car which doesn't really feature in, well, any racing game at all, especially in terms of console races. It's a insanely cool car in terms of just the way it looks. It's got that typical Italian, sporty look. It sounds great, it looks great, and it actually drives very well. I absolutely cannot praise this car enough. Absolute worthy addition. I think it's like 70 grand, and it's some of the most fun you can have in this game for 70 grand. Great car, glad it's in there. Let's talk about the other car, the Nissan Skyline. Now, this is one that people are kind of getting on Polyphony's back about. We've got tons of Skylines already. In my opinion, this again is a worthy addition. Maybe not for the price point. If you look at it, 500 grand for a car that's essentially the weakest of the bunch, that we've got in this update, then yeah, it's not great. The stats don't really do the price justice. Obviously, they're going off a different format for that. Classic cars, how much they're really worth and all that stuff. So yes, it's probably in line with real world prices. But the car itself is a car which, again, does not really feature in many places. You usually either get the GTR model that was before that, or obviously you get, you know, your R32s, your R34s, your modern day GTRs and such. So again, a worthy addition, and I'm very excited to, you know, customize it, get, you know, fully upgrade it, and just kind of dive into that car, in all honesty. So yes, it's a worthy addition, and in my opinion, apart from the one that came after that, which I actually do genuinely want. I know people can, you know, go on about the Skyline meme and Gran Turismo all day, saying there's a million of them. But honestly, I'd absolutely love an R31 Skyline, just to kind of, you know, start completing that set of kind of iconic Skylines. And I feel like that's, again, another one of the more underappreciated ones. But that's kind of, you know, off point. In all honesty, it's a great car, and it feels like it kind of completes that set that we currently have within Gran Turismo 7. You know, if you are a GTR fan, which a lot of people out there are, and, you know, especially in where Gran Turismo comes from, Japan, you know, it's their kind of sort of, you know, McLaren or whatever. Obviously it's not on that level, but, you know, it's as kind of iconic as like Aston Martin is to, you know, the British, and things like that. You know, it's an absolute icon, and the world over as well. Let's not, you know, kind of talk it down. The Skyline's loved by many people, you know, and yeah, it's a worthy addition. So let's talk about the third car, the kind of one that a lot of people have really complained about, which is the Roadster, the NRA. In my opinion, love it. To be honest, it's awesome because it actually helps me in terms of my content, because obviously I run my league. It means I can get rid of the awful handling kind of street going version that we've been using and swap it out for a more focused version. And in terms of one mate racing, I think it's an absolutely awesome car. Again, worthy addition, not really much I can say on it. It's just a modern Roadster, but kind of a variant of it, which I get, which is why a lot of people are moaning about it, but I enjoyed it, to be honest. I think it's a good car, solid choice. And let's be honest, we're getting 4 instead of the usual 3 in this update. And thankfully this time we haven't got an EV, which was ruined weeks prior. So we essentially had 2 cars, really, in terms of an update. So let's talk about the final one. Obviously another one, which I've kind of touched on, and people are moaning. The updated GTR GT3. Great car, loved it. Worthy addition. Glad to see the GTR updated. And honestly, look, you know, the GTR is massively outdated. It's been an outdated model, you know, pretty much since GT Sport released. You know, I'm very surprised it never kind of entered the game in that era and got carried over to GT7. But that kind of is what it is. At the end of the day, it's an updated GT3 car, and like most GT3 cars, they kind of get updated. I would love for them to put the Evo version of the Ferrari in, because again, that's another car which is kind of lagging behind now massively. And then obviously you've got things that have kind of recently had updates, like obviously BMW have updated their GT3, Mercedes I believe as well. I think either like this year or maybe the year prior, they give it kind of an update, which, while from a kind of looks perspective it doesn't look massively different in terms of the performance, obviously it's an update to an old, you know, a customer GT3 car, and obviously their own, so it must have been worth doing at that point, because obviously, you know, GT3 machines, they're built to a certain spec and they get outdated, you know, within around like what, let's say 5-6 years tops. So for them to bring these kind of more up-to-date GT3 cars into the game, I'm all for it. And to be honest, I absolutely love the GTR GT3, always have, ever since I've seen it appear on the racing scene. It's obviously a long-running model, and even to this day it's still ran in, you know, things like Super GT and stuff. I believe there's still one this year running within GT300. So you know what, in terms of the cars, there's no VGTs, which in my opinion I am not the biggest fan of. They're all down to earth cars. You've got 2 classics, a one make, you know, almost perfect one make cup car, and then you've got an updated GT3. So I feel like genuinely they've catered to everyone, but some people will just moan for the sake of moaning. Now, what you're seeing on screen here is a bit of a surprising one, really. These are the Mazda Spirit liveried cars. Now, I did actually go out and buy a new version of each of these cars to kind of get the footage and stuff. Obviously, I wanted to cover everything within the update, and these were quite a nice little surprise. Now, some of you may not know this, but I'm a massive Mazda fanboy. anything Mazda, absolutely love it. You know, while the road cars aren't as cool as they used to be, you know, there's nothing will beat that legendary sound of a rotary, or, you know, just Mazda race cars always seem to be really, really cool. Hence why I absolutely love sort of the RX-7 Concept GT3, the Atenza, love that thing. I even raced that in my own league with a touring car livery on it. Roadsters, they're cool, kind of. They're not my favourites, to be honest. So, in all honesty, as someone that absolutely loves Mazdas, this was a nice little surprise. Now, obviously, this event, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Japan only. It takes place within Gran Turismo 7, but it's pretty cool that they've actually, you know, gone out of their way and still given them to everyone. So, yes, I did 100% buy another version of cars I already have. But, you know, that kind of is what it is. You know, I'm not bothered. Money's really not that bad within Gran Turismo 7, honestly. People kind of make it out to be worse than it is. If you know where you're looking for money, you can quite easily go and get it. So, yeah, I mean, awesome little extra. Genuinely, I can't complain, you know. I really cannot give a bad thought about them, because it was something I didn't expect. It's one of my favourite manufacturers, and it was just kind of there, and it was just awesome, to be honest. Cannot, like I said, complain about that. Now, let's talk about scapes. Okay, this is the one that really just kind of throw me off, and it's such a strange thing that they kind of highlight them as a big part of an update, when in reality you get two a time, and I feel like we're kind of used to that now. And yes, there is people out there that are absolutely addicted to taking pictures of these cars, and I do get it. Like, don't get me wrong, the scapes mode in Gran Turismo is much, much better than the kind of photo mode you get in a lot of games. But it seems weird that they kind of, you know, make this out to be a big feature of an update. I've still never understood that. So let's quickly cover them. So you have autumn leaves, which I think was kind of expected, considering it's autumn, spooky season, and all that good stuff. So I'm really not shocked by that one coming in. But then we have a really weird one, and it actually kind of put a smile on my face, which, look, it may sound really strange, but the Whitby one. Okay, so Whitby is a little seaside village, or town, whatever you want to call it, in the United Kingdom. It's a place I go to every year. It's been kind of a family tradition since I was a child. So, you know, to see this appear in a game that I have a lifelong kind of sort of, I guess, what would you call it, sort of affiliation with, it was just really cool. It was just a pretty cool moment where I was like, huh, you know, that's awesome. I'll go and take a few pictures there, you know, sort of thing. It's something where even people in my family that, you know, are not bothered by video games, like if they saw a picture, they'd be like, hey, that's you know, so and so in Whitby and all that kind of good stuff. So yes, I genuinely, you know, did get a little smile out of scapes, which is just so weird to say, because it's such a random feature. And yes, I'm glad they're constantly updating it and adding new kind of photo opportunities. But again, they shouldn't really hype it up to be a main feature. So I just thought that was a cool little side bit to talk about. So that's pretty much all the kind of, you know, cars covered, oddball bits. It's kind of the little bit extras. So let's talk about the other kind of main meat of, well, any update with Gran Turismo 7. The events. Okay, so this is a pretty big one. I actually enjoyed all of them. That's a shock. In all honesty, I usually go into these thinking, okay, we're going to have probably one good race and the others are going to be throwaways. Now, if you are looking at these in terms of payout, they are not perfect. And no, the events themselves are not perfect. However, did they all feel like they had a place within the game? And in my honest opinion, yes. So let's talk about the menu books first, okay? Or sorry, should I say menu book? I'll give a quick opinion on the extras as well, but I think they're kind of obvious. And then I'll talk about the kind of what I like to call the extra events, because we obviously had two kind of continuations of previous menu books in this one. So, quick word on the extras menu. They are what they are. They're a decent pick. Obviously, you've got the NSX Extra and the Sylvia. They're quite easy to get, so essentially you just can use them to get a free engine and a free part ticket. They kind of are what they are. They're not as difficult as, you know, well, I say difficult, obviously there's no difficulty involved, but they're not as awkward as getting something like the Porsche one, which I'm still waiting for that classic Porsche, classic Spider to jump in the dealer, so I can actually go and get it. But yeah, they're pretty straightforward, so that's them covered. But the main meat, okay, the main kind of event part of the game, the historic sports car masters, I believe it's called. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw this. Now, it's probably one that most people think, oh, you know, where's the Group 1 and stuff. Obviously, we've already had them, to be honest. So to get something that actually kind of is kind of made for the appreciation of the classics in this game, which in my opinion I don't feel like they get enough light of a look in, you know, for them to focus on that is much better than, in my opinion, getting something like the kind of Clubman Cup events, because I'd feel like they don't work that good within GT7 anymore, mainly because of the kind of roster of cars that we have. You know, it worked great in kind of the previous ones when we had, you know, silly little cars like Citroen Saxos, Peugeot 206s and stuff, but nowadays there's not enough of them kind of weird, like what we class as really slow cars to build up. So, you know, to get something that appreciates the classics, the cars that have probably been paid millions for and sat in a garage for so long, was really awesome. And not only that, it did make use of two of the cars that we actually got in the pack, that being the Nissan Skyline and obviously the Maserati. I chose the Maserati for it, and I found myself absolutely loving it. In all honesty, I genuinely did not find myself getting bored or fed up. And it was weird because, let's be straight up, the racing wasn't that good. You still have that kind of weird start where the AI's, you know, what, like 20-30 seconds ahead of you, but I felt like for once it actually worked in the favour of that, you know, specific three races that was given. Obviously you have Goodwood, you have Spa, and you have Nürburgring, three kind of really legendary racetracks that are very much suited to the classics, and it just felt really awesome. Like they've been crying out for events for a long time. In terms of those, you know, free tracks especially, they're very lacking for how awesome they are. Obviously you have things like the Goodwood Revival, which I fully recommend watching if you've never seen it. But what you will notice, and this is kind of my point about them, if you ever go and watch real life classic car racing, these cars are insanely valuable nowadays. They are rare, they're not going to want to be battered up, so they're much more kind of less contact heavy and less racy than if you go and watch something like, you know, touring cars, GT3 and stuff. You know, you won't see as many overtakes. It's more all about the show. You know, these classic race cars, which you don't see anymore, obviously they're completely rare. You know, and that's kind of what it felt like with this cafe menu. It felt more like a classic car showcase and a love letter to these classic cars than it did a proper racing menu book. You know, going through that grid, kind of seeing 20 odd cars or whatever it was, you know, all classic rare cars within the game, some which you'd never really even remember or even in the game, just kind of put a smile on my face. It felt more like a cruise than it did a race. And to be honest, I felt like it actually suited the game, you know, that kind of style of cafe menu. You know, the racing wasn't great, but in terms of the show and seeing these awesome classic cars out on track, it felt perfect, and I really cannot say a bad thing about them. Obviously you've got the three awesome tracks as well. 100% massively enjoyed it. So that's the kind of main events, you know, covered, done with. So let's talk about the what I like to call the extras. So we have one for the Sylvia sisters and one for the Group 1 prototypes. Now the Sylvia sisters is essentially a continuation of a menu book that we had in the previous update. So for me it felt like a massive oddball, because it's like, well, why didn't you just make the last cafe menu 4 events then? Because it was just such a weird one. But in terms of the way that event was, for what it was awesome. Now, people really rinsed on the Sylvia sisters kind of cafe menu. I absolutely loved it, because personally I love the Sylvias. I think they're an awesome group of cars, and for me this is an event that should have really been in the proper menu. It felt much more suited to that kind of JDM street racing vibe that most of the Sylvias give off, especially the ones that you kind of see racing around with you. You know, it was much more suited than, say, like, I believe it was, I want to say Deep Forest. While that was one of the more standouts, it felt a bit odd. if you know what I mean. It was just, all of them events felt more like races than they were kind of giving off what a Sylvia's all about, which in my opinion is ridiculous drift missile builds, or sort of tuned little monsters. So being able to kind of take these cars through Tokyo at night, in my opinion, on one of the better Tokyo layouts. Obviously being able to get them tuned Sylvia's out, seeing all the the anti-lag, the turbo, the backfires, it was just absolutely awesome. I really cannot fault it, and it didn't feel out of place for once. It felt like what the Sylvia Sisters menu should have been when it was actually released. So now let's talk about the bigger event, the Group 1 prototype race. Now, when I saw it, I said, look, this could be a grinding event or it could not be. Now, it turned out to not be a grinding event, and I've obviously just covered that and kind of said like there is ways around it that they could actually improve this event. But in terms of this event, with the kind of racing it gave me each and every time, because I've actually done it a couple of times now, and just how it works, for me this is as close as the racing has got to have been, being perfect within GT7 when you're racing against the AI. It's set at Fuji, which is an awesome track. It's got the awesome Group 1 prototype machines, the VGT Group 1s, all that, all bundled in one. So in terms of, the look and the spectacle of the race, it's absolutely awesome. Yes, it's a bit on the short side, but you still have to kind of micromanage fuel and tyre wear, and, when to, perform your overtakes. You've got to watch the weather just in case you have a downpour. You've got your tyres wearing off. You've got to try and keep them alive. And, I was every time trying to do a one-stop strategy and stuff. And it honestly provided the best racing I think I've ever had in terms of obviously racing the AI within Gran Turismo 7. And it was the final thing that I actually covered in terms of, events and cars and stuff. And I felt like I was ending 1.25 on a high. In terms of a content perspective, it honestly felt great. And I sat there and I thought, okay, yes, they've missed the mark in terms of, promised things. But in terms of what is here, from an update perspective, this is much, much better than, well, probably any update that we've actually had. I genuinely enjoyed all the content in here. Nothing felt out of place, nothing felt forced. And honestly, this race was sort of like the cherry on top of the cake. It was absolutely awesome, and I feel like this is probably my new favorite race in terms of the racing, not the payouts and such. And I did discuss that in the main video, so if you want my honest opinion on how they could, sort of get more people to run these events more, then obviously I have said that in that video, so go ahead and watch that one. But in terms of actually being just very enjoyable, honestly, update 1.25 was that. I feel like my expectations were so low, because usually the content really isn't that enjoyable, that I was massively pleasantly surprised. And I honestly think if people just kind of cool their heads a bit and get past the selling cars thing and all the other, bad points that, yes, they've kind of missed off, which, yes, I get it's unforgivable, but if you kind of look at it from what we actually got in this update, it felt like a massive step in the right direction. In all honesty, GT or Polyphony, whatever, give us more of this version of GT, because this is the kind of racing we want. It was absolutely awesome. The content, for me personally, I think you did it great. I think you covered all the bases in terms of the cars. People are just going to complain for the sake of complaining, but if you look at the type of cars we got, they seem to have catered to, well, everyone. You've got the people that want more classic cars, they gave you two. You want people that want updated GT3s, they've done an updated GT3. You wanted people that love one make racing online and league racing, you had the Roadster. So I feel like everything within this update actually had purpose. None of it just felt shoehorned in, and even the oddball event, the Sylvia Sisters, felt like what Sylvia Sisters should have been when it first arrived. So in all honesty, I'm leaving update 1.25 in terms of covering all the content in an actual happy mood for once, to be honest, which is really weird. Like, at the end of the day, there was no track. I get that's a missed opportunity. I think they genuinely are starting to sort of plan around doing a big reveal for it, because if it is Grand Valley, look, it's a nostalgic track. It's a track people absolutely love for years upon years, and it would be the perfect kind of setting to do it at sort of the World Series sort of finale or whatever. So yeah, I can understand kind of why they're doing that. The selling cars feature, yeah, I've got a feeling that they're either reworking it again because it has been ready for a while, or they're just going to be holding it off for a little bit. There will be some sort of reason behind it, and in all honesty, it isn't going to be the kind of feature you expect. I think as soon as I found out how it works, to be honest, I've never been that bothered about selling cars. I really just wasn't caring at all for that feature. It's not going to be like what majority of people think. So, you know, the more people kind of move away from complaining about this selling cars feature, the better. I kind of just wish they did put it out there, because it's, you know, ridiculous at this point how many people are asking for it. Personally, for me, I have multiple versions and different builds of almost, you know, every car. You know, I have tons. I have like 3 versions of the S14, you know, stuff like that. I'm a collector, and I like to build different cars around different things. So in all honesty, I'm really not bothered by selling cars. What I really would like is a way to kind of sort of sort our cars into different categories within a garage, give us that kind of option. In terms of your duplicates and stuff and your prize cars, if you don't want them, just discard them, because honestly, I don't think you're going to be getting any money for that in terms of the selling. I don't think it works that way at all. It's not like it was, you know, way back when in sort of the GT4 days and such. It's going to essentially work kind of how it was in GT Sport, obviously with added layers due to microtransactions and how the economy is. So yes, there is certain things that kind of not touched on, and if I had to like sort of nitpick at one thing, because I think it's would actually completely overhaul the game, equal the custom race kind of length and stuff to what it is for the actual event. So if we've run something like Sardinia, if we run a different kind of track and such and run a race similar to that, give us a similar payout, you know, give us a way to kind of make our own custom races, but make it worth it for the pay. Obviously, this game's kind of about car collecting as well as racing and all that stuff. So if they change up how the custom race kind of works, then I honestly think that would solve all this kind of, you know, argument for the money issue and stuff, which I get is a kind of a long shot for them to do, because obviously microtransactions, all that stuff, I think that's obvious at this point. But again, I feel like that would solve a lot of the criticisms in terms of events, and would actually save polyphony time. Instead of pumping out events, we could just, well, make our own, and it'd actually be worth doing. I feel like that's where, you know, instead of, I guess, having to pump their own content out, the lack of content would be solved, because it'd be worth us to do our own races, and there's tons of customization options. So it kind of saves them a bit of time, as well as kind of giving the community what they want, which is, you know, more events and such. Obviously, there was a few extras like physics changes, tire wear, and stuff like that. I believe they also kind of sort of edited how the damage worked, so I feel like that's not as bad anymore. I did do some testing actually previously with a couple of the, I believe the Lancia engine swap, just before this event, hence why the racing line and the braking areas on and whatever, because that car has awful brakes. So yes, it is possible to still use those builds. Are they as good as they were before? Not really. But again, you know, look, the PP's changed again. It is what it is. You should really expect that at this point. But don't worry, I'm sure we'll all find ways to get around it, and new builds will appear and stuff like that. So again, I've never understood why people go up in arms. But in terms of the quality of life changes, they're pretty good. I cannot complain. The game feels as perfect as ever. I know a lot of people just slate it, saying, oh, it's awful. It's really not. In terms of actually feeling like a racing game, it's very good. So, you know, things like the other quality of life change, sort of the custom races where the cars actually use the proper tyres now, that's a massive change in terms of sort of, I guess, running custom events, especially if you want to do your own championship, which I was doing originally with the kind of Super GT series, but had to stop due to cars essentially running wrong tyres. So that's now been righted, as well as being able to kind of save the settings as well now, since I first did that video. Yeah, it is definitely very good in terms of the quality of life changes. I cannot complain. So overall, update 1.25 is good. I never thought I'd be saying that, but if you take it for what it is, the content that's in it, this is the best update we have had probably in a long time. That is my honest opinion. I have genuinely really enjoyed 1.25. So that's going to be it for today's video. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Turn that bell notifications on so you don't miss an update from myself. And I will catch you all in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.